All right, so we're back for part 2 of our daily UPSC Current Affairs deep dive. We're looking at April 5th, 2025. Now, a heads up, some of what we cover today might sound familiar.
Yeah, a bit of revision never hurts, right? Especially when it comes to UPSC prep. It's all about reinforcing those core concepts.
Exactly. So, like always, we've got a really interesting mix of developments to unpack today, all carefully chosen to keep your UPSC preparation right on track.
And the range today is impressive, I have to say. We'll be delving into everything from governance and economic trends to international relations, social justice issues, environmental concerns, even parliamentary procedures. There's something here for every part of your UPSC syllabus.
Okay, let's jump right in. I think a good place to start is with that recent Supreme Court reminder about arrest procedures and, safeguarding individual rights.
Right, you mean how they've really stressed that law enforcement has got to stick to the constitutional and statutory safeguards whenever they're making an arrest or dealing with people in custody?
Exactly. They even specifically cited that Somnath v. State of Maharashtra case from last year, 2023.
Yeah, the Somnath case is interesting because it basically reaffirmed what the court already said way back in 1997 in that landmark DK Basu v. State of West Bengal case. It shows how consistently they've focused on protecting individual liberties, when the state has the power to arrest someone.
So, for those of us prepping for UPSC, what are the really crucial takeaways from these DK Basu guidelines that are being highlighted again?
Well, there's quite a few. Proper identification of officers is absolutely non-negotiable. So anyone involved in an arrest, they have to have their name tags visible and their designation clear. That's basic accountability right there.
Makes sense.
And then there's the memo of arrest. It has to be prepared right then and there when the arrest happens, and it needs to have the exact time, the date, and it has to be signed by an independent witness and the person being arrested. No room for, oh, we forgot, or anything like that.
A clear paper trail. Smart.
Yeah.
What else?
Right. Next is informing a relative or a friend of the person arrested as soon as possible. They can't be, holding someone without anyone knowing.
Right. Basic human decency, but also a really important legal protection.
Absolutely. And there's more. The arrested person, if they ask for it, they've got the right to a medical exam right when they're arrested, and if there are any injuries, those have to be written down, super carefully in a separate memo. That's huge for preventing, any claims of abuse in custody.
It is.
And there's a follow-up medical exam every 48 hours throughout their detention. And maybe most importantly, the person arrested has the right to talk to their lawyer during interrogation. Can't emphasize that one enough.
I mean, these are really substantial protections. How does all this tie back to our fundamental rights, the ones in the Constitution?
It's all connected. These safeguards, they come straight from Article 22 of the Constitution. It's the one all about protecting the rights of anyone who's arrested or detained. The court's guidelines, they're like the practical instructions for making sure those constitutional guarantees actually happen in real life. It's a perfect example of, the link between governance and fundamental rights, something UPSC loves to ask about.
And it's not just these big cases, right? There are actual laws that back all this up.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like in the Indian Penal Code, sections 330 and 331, they lay out the punishment if someone hurts a person in custody to force a confession out of them. That's a serious deterrent right there. And then there's section 196 of that new Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita they brought in last year, the 2023 one. Now, a magistrate has to investigate every single custodial death. Another layer of accountability.
Makes sense.
Don't forget those guidelines from the NHRC, the National Human Rights Commission, that they put out back in '93. Plus, we've got to uphold all the international agreements on human rights that we've signed. It all adds up.
Okay. Shifting gears a bit, there's been some news about the creamy layer in OBCs. A parliamentary committee just released a report about it, right?
Yep, that's right. It's the Parliamentary Committee on the Welfare of Other Backward Classes. They submitted their report to the Lok Sabha, and one of the big things they looked at was how they decide who falls under the creamy layer within the OBC community. And get this, they're saying the income limit that defines the creamy layer should be higher.
Okay, hold on. I know we've talked about this before, but for anyone who needs a refresher, what exactly is the creamy layer?
Good point. Basically, the creamy layer is like the section of the other backward classes that's doing better off, socially and economically. This idea actually comes from the famous Indra Sawhney case back in 1992. The Supreme Court, they said, okay, 27% reservation for OBCs in government jobs, that's fine, but you got to exclude the creamy layer. They wanted to make sure the benefits of reservation actually reach those OBC folks who are still, really disadvantaged.
So the reservation system isn't benefiting those who don't need it as much? Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And after that judgment, they set up the Ramanandam Prasad Committee. Their job was to figure out the rules for identifying this creamy layer. They came up with a system that looked at two main things. First, if your parents had certain high-level government jobs. And second, if your family income was above a certain limit.
And what is that income limit right now?
It's currently set at 8 lakh rupees per year. That was decided back in 2017.
Okay, so what did this recent parliamentary committee report say about all this? What were their key points and recommendations?
Well, one thing they pointed out is that different states, they don't all use the same standard for deciding who's in the creamy layer, with the income and wealth tests. That just isn't fair, right? It creates a really uneven playing field across the country.
Right, it should be consistent.
Exactly. So they recommended that every state should use the same formula to figure out the creamy layer. That way, it's fair for everyone.
Makes a lot of sense. What about that 8 lakh rupee income limit? Do they have anything to say about that?
Yeah, they said it's way too low. They think that because of this low limit, a lot of OBC folks who are actually still struggling, they're getting excluded from the benefits of reservation. So they recommended raising it, making it substantially higher. But they also said it's important to talk to all the different groups affected before making that change.
So a balanced approach. Consult everyone and then make a decision.
Precisely. It has to be a fair system that works for everyone.
Okay, let's zoom out a little. I noticed that the External Affairs Minister recently hinted at a potential shift in global diplomacy, like moving towards a more regional and issue-specific approach.
Oh yeah, he was speaking at a meeting for the BIMSTEC summit, and he talked about how regional groups like BIMSTEC need to think bigger, especially with the way things are changing globally. He called it a shift from the old, broad multilateralism to something called minilateralism.
Minilateralism. Interesting word. I think I'm catching that one more and more these days. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. Minilateralism is basically about forming smaller groups of countries, usually 3 or 4, that team up to tackle a very specific problem or threat they all share. The key is they're super focused and want results fast. Think of groups like I2U2, India, Israel, the UAE, and the US, or even BRICS, though that's got a broader agenda.
Okay, so I2U2, BRICS, those are good examples to remember. What's driving this trend towards these smaller and more focused partnerships? Why are these agenda-specific minilaterals on the rise?
Well, for one, those big traditional institutions like the UN or the WTO, they just have too many members to agree easily. It's like herding cats, so things get delayed, nobody can decide, and important global issues just stall.
Makes sense.
Too many cooks.
Yeah, exactly. With minilaterals, it's a smaller table, everyone's usually on the same page, and they can actually get things done faster. Like during COVID, remember how the Quad, India, the US, Australia, and Japan, they coordinated pretty quickly on vaccine distribution.
See. Another reason is the whole superpower rivalry thing, all the geopolitical tension. It paralyzes those bigger institutions. Nothing moves. It's like that mess with the WTO's dispute settlement system. Nobody can agree, so countries are going for regional trade deals instead, like RCEP.
So those big global bodies aren't really working as well as they should.
Not always, no. Plus, there are all these urgent new problems like climate change, cyber attacks, pandemics. The old structures just aren't responding fast enough. And then you've got success stories like the International Solar Alliance. It's very focused, and it shows how effective it can be to pool resources and expertise when everyone has the same goal.
So is the minister saying we should ditch multilateralism altogether?
Nope, not at all. His point is we need both. India should be building these smaller partnerships for specific issues while also pushing for reforms of the big organizations like the UN and the WTO. It's about using the best tool for the job. That's a really important point for your IR prep, by the way.
Okay, noted. Let's move on to something a bit more foundational, the separation of powers. That's been in the news recently, hasn't it?
Yeah, the whole idea of separating powers, it's like democracy 101, right? It goes way back to that French guy, Montesquieu. Basically, it's about not letting any one person or group have all the power in a government.
Because that's how you get dictators and tyranny, right?
Bingo. That's why you divide the government into 3 parts. The legislature makes the laws, the executive puts those laws into action, and the judiciary interprets them and makes sure everyone plays by the rules. That's the separation of powers.
And why is this so crucial for a democracy to function properly?
It's like a 3-legged stool. You need all 3 legs for it to stand. First, it prevents abuse of power. Each branch keeps the others in check, so no one gets too powerful. Look at Article 50 of our Constitution. It separates the judiciary from the executive. That's essential.
Right. No one branch is above the others.
Exactly. Second, It creates this system of checks and balances. Each branch can limit the power of the others, so everyone stays accountable. Like in the Kesavananda Harati case, the Supreme Court limited Parliament's power to change the Constitution too much. That's the judiciary checking the legislature.
Checks and balances, classic political science concept.
Absolutely. And finally, the separation of powers protects the rule of law and individual liberties. A judiciary that's independent, not controlled by the politicians, it's crucial for making sure laws are interpreted fairly and everyone gets a fair shake.
So how does all this work in India specifically? Because our system is a bit different, right?
Yeah, it's not as strictly separated as, say, the U.S. We've got a parliamentary system, so the executive branch, the prime minister and his council, they all come from parliament, so there's some overlap.
Right, they're not completely separate entities.
Nope. But we still have mechanisms to make sure each branch can do its job without interference. Like Articles 122 and 212, they say the courts can't interfere in how Parliament does its business. That protects the legislature's independence.
So it's more like an interdependent system rather than completely separate branches.
Right. It's about balance. The president, who's part of the executive, appoints the Supreme Court and High Court judges, but they act on the advice of the prime minister and the council. And then the judiciary can review laws passed by Parliament and actions taken by the executive. It's a complex dance.
A system of checks and balances, so no one gets too powerful.
Exactly. And speaking of checks and balances, the vice president made an interesting comment recently. He said, in a democracy, the executive branch answers to Parliament and the people through elections, not to the courts.
So it's a reminder about the role of each branch and who they're ultimately accountable to.
Precisely. It's all about understanding the nuances of our political system, which is super important for polity prep.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential advantages of minilateralism, but are there any downsides like potential risks or challenges that come with it?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, it can be great for, getting things done quickly on specific issues. There are some things to watch out for. For example, even though it's easier for these smaller groups to build trust, their plans can go off the rails if governments change or priorities shift within those countries.
That's a good point. Political changes can really disrupt things.
Absolutely. Remember what happened to the QAD back in 2007? It kind of fell apart after the Japanese prime minister at the time, Shinzo Abe, resigned. That shows how fragile these arrangements can be.
Right. Governments change, priorities shift. What else should we be mindful of when it comes to minilateralism?
Another concern is whether everyone gets a seat at the table. The whole idea of these exclusive smaller groups, it can leave some countries feeling left out, and that can cause problems, damage regional stability. For instance, some ASEAN countries are worried about being sidelined by security-focused groups like AUKUS. They worry it could upset the balance of power in the region.
It's like forming a clique and leaving others out can create resentment.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, these smaller groups, they might not have the resources or global reach to tackle huge problems like climate change or, global pandemic. Those need everyone to chip in and work together.
Okay, fair enough. Let's shift gears to some economic news. The U.S. president just announced new reciprocal tariffs. What's that all about?
So basically, the U.S. is putting new tariffs on imports from over 180 countries. There's this 10% baseline tariff that'll apply broadly, but they're also slapping a 27% tariff specifically on stuff coming from India.
27%? Why that number?
Well, they're saying it's half the rate India puts on U.S. goods, so it's reciprocal. The idea is to balance things out.
So it's like a you tax me, I tax you situation.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just India. They've announced tariffs on other big economies, too. 34% on China, 24% on Japan, 20% on the EU. It's a pretty big shift in U.S. trade policy.
So what's the rationale behind all this? Why is the U.S. doing this?
They're basically saying they want to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S., and they also want to punish countries they think are engaging in unfair trade practices. It's all part of this bigger trend of economic nationalism that we're seeing.
Economic nationalism, we hear that term a lot. Can you explain what it means in simple terms?
It's the idea that a country should protect its own economy, like its industries and jobs, even if it means putting up barriers to trade. It's about prioritizing national interests over global ones.
So putting your own country first, economically speaking.
Exactly. And there are different flavors of economic nationalism. You've got the developmentalist kind, where the government actively tries to build up certain industries, like India did after independence. And then you've got the mercantilist or isolationist kind, where the focus is on protecting domestic industries from foreign competition, like the America First policy a while back.
So the U.S. is moving more towards that second type, it seems.
Yeah, that's the impression they're giving.
Interesting. Okay, let's look at some developments here at home. I saw that the Lokayap passed the Coastal Shipping Bill 2024. What's the significance of that?
That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
It finally gives India a proper legal framework for coastal shipping. It covers all kinds of vessels, from huge cargo ships to little fishing boats, even oil rigs.
So what are some of the key changes it brings in?
Well, one of the biggest is that Indian ships won't need a trading license to operate along the coast anymore. That'll make things much easier for domestic shipping companies. But foreign ships, they'll still need a license from the Director General of Shipping if they want to transport goods or passengers between Indian ports.
Okay, so less red tape for Indian companies. What else?
The bill says they need to come up with a national coastal and inland shipping strategic plan. This will be their roadmap for developing the sector, and it'll be updated every 2 years to stay relevant. Plus, they're setting up a national database for coastal shipping, which should improve data collection and planning.
So better planning and more efficient use of data. Makes sense.
The bill also gives more power to the Director General of Shipping to enforce the rules. And the central government still has the final say, like granting exemptions and overseeing things.
So a more streamlined and regulated system overall.
Yeah, exactly.
What are the main benefits expected from this bill?
Well, it should take some pressure off our roads and railways by moving more cargo by sea. It also aims to reduce our reliance on foreign ships, especially in sensitive areas, by boosting the Indian shipping industry. Plus, coastal shipping is generally cheaper and more environmentally friendly than trucking or using trains, so it aligns with our environmental goals. And finally, it'll likely lead to more jobs and development in coastal areas.
It sounds like a win-win.
Yeah, it has the potential to be quite beneficial.
Okay, let's wrap up with a quick rundown of some other interesting developments.
Right, some shorter but noteworthy bits. Firstly, seaweed farming in India is expected to grow massively in the next decade. It's currently valued at around 200 crore rupees, but could hit over 3,000 crore.
Wow, that's a huge jump. Why is seaweed so valuable?
Seaweed is packed with nutrients and is used to make all sorts of things, from thickeners for food and medicine to those jelly-like substances you find in desserts and labs. Alginate, agar, and carrageenan, those are the key products to remember.
Okay, noted. What else?
The Prime Minister of Thailand gifted our Prime Minister a copy of the Tipitaka, the sacred Buddhist scriptures, written in Pali. It's a gesture that highlights the strong cultural and religious ties between the two countries, especially now that their relationship has been upgraded to a strategic partnership.
And this Tipitaka, it's important for Theravada Buddhism, right?
Absolutely. Think of it as the foundation of that tradition. It's divided into 3 parts. The Vinaya Pitaka with the rules for monks and nuns, the Siddha Pitaka with the Buddhist teachings, and the Abhidhamma Pitaka, which is more philosophical and psychological.
Interesting. Anything else happening on the home front?
Yeah, all Anganwadi centers in India are now registered on the Pyoshan Tracker app. It's a mobile app that lets them track attendance, monitor the growth of children, and manage nutrition services in real time. It replaces all that paperwork and should make things more transparent and efficient. It's all part of the government's effort to fight malnutrition.
Great to see technology being used for such an important cause.
Absolutely. The NCPOR, the National Center for Polar and Ocean Research, is celebrating its 25th anniversary. It's based in Goa and does all sorts of research in the Arctic, Antarctica, and the Southern Ocean. They manage India's research bases in those regions.
25 years of polar research, that's quite a milestone.
It is. And speaking of milestones, the Warangal Chapada chili, a type of chili from Telangana, just got a GI tag.
Another GI tag for India. What's so special about this chili?
Well, it's bright red, round like a tomato, and not as spicy as some other chilies. But it's got a great flavor because of its unique chemical makeup. There are 3 main types, and now with the GI tag, they're protected.
Excellent. Anything in the science world that caught your eye?
There's some interesting research on the venom of the Pope's pit viper. They're learning more about how it works, which could be useful for developing new medicines and antivenom. This is especially important for India, where this viper is found, and we're trying to reduce snakebite deaths.
That's really important work, especially given our goal to cut snakebite deaths.
Absolutely. Speaking of noteworthy events, Lok Sabha had a record-breaking 0-hour session recently. A whopping 202 MPs spoke during a 5-hour session. That's a lot of voices being heard.
0 hour, that's the time after question hour where MPs can raise urgent issues, right?
Exactly. It's not officially in the rule book, but it's a crucial way for them to hold the government accountable and raise important matters.
So, a powerful tool for our parliamentarians. And finally, any updates on global efforts related to climate change?
Yeah, India's been pushing the other BRICS nations to get behind this thing called the Baku to Bilam Roadmap. It's all about mobilizing a massive 1.3 trillion US dollars every year by 2035 to help developing countries meet their climate goals.
Ambitious, to say the least.
Definitely. This follows on from the SAPLI 29 meeting in Baku, where they agreed to set a new global finance target for climate action. The goal is to scale up financial support for developing nations so they can make the transition to a low-carbon future.
It's good to see India taking a proactive role on the global stage.
Absolutely. So there you have it, the second part of your daily current affairs deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from individual rights during arrest to global shifts in power and economics to all sorts of interesting developments here in India. It's all interconnected and crucial for your UPSC journey.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? How these seemingly separate events and issues all tie together. Whether it's protecting the rights of someone being arrested or figuring out how to navigate a world where countries are becoming more nationalistic while also facing global problems that need everyone to work together, it's all part of the same complex puzzle.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to ponder. How will this tension between national sovereignty and the need for international cooperation play out in the years to come? And specifically, how will it shape India's role in the world? Something worth reflecting on as you continue your UPSC preparations.
It definitely is. We hope this deep dive has given you lots to think about and has helped you make sense of these crucial current events. If you found it helpful, please do like and subscribe for more in-depth analyses. Stay tuned for the next part of your daily current affairs deep dive.